Sadiq Khan must resign, and I don't think we're ever going to see a move away from the clown decade where things are getting worse until he is completely kicked out of public life, because the man has overseen the complete and total decline of London, not only in terms of crime that we will get into, but in terms of completing a cultural revolution. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take a look. London Overground, new names and colours for 6 lines revealed. Web of orange on tube map revamped to celebrate city's unique local history and culture, says Mayor. Now, I'm absolutely fine with the boring orange overground lines being renamed to give them more unique identities, if for no other reason than it is easier to read the overground map. I have been to London numerous times, and yes, it seems to just lose all purpose once you get to the overground side. It's all just orange. So absolutely fine idea, nothing wrong with it. How does Sadiq Khan screw it up? Well, let's take a look at their names and what Sadiq Khan has to say himself. New, for the first time ever, are 6 London Overground lines are each getting a new name and colour. Read more about the inspiration and meaning behind each new name. And as you can see, it's just total decline. Number 1, grey Liberty Line. Fine, nothing wrong with it called the Liberty Line. That's probably the least offensive one, second least offensive one, I think. I suppose we can go with joint least offensive one there. Second is a gold Lioness Line. Yes, if you are wondering, that is exactly what you're thinking. That is to celebrate women's football. Next, it's the Mildmay Line. Again, least offensive. That's something to do with a hospital. We'll get into it in a sec. Next is green and the Suffragette Line. Took 100 years for terrorists to be celebrated officially by London. Amazing. Next it's the Weaver Line, again not particularly offensive. And then finally, the Windrush Line. Probably the most offensive one, I'd say. I don't know, it's between that and the Suffragette, because both of them have been completely astroturfed into something completely different than to what they were, but we'll get into detail of that as we go through this thread. The Windrush Line, Highbury and Islington to Clapham Junction, New Cross, Crystal Palace and West Croydon. The map colour is red, and the Windrush generation continues to shape our city. This line honours them and runs through areas with strong ties to Caribbean communities. In other words, what Sadiq Khan has literally just said there is that this line goes through our new Caribbean colonies in London. And it in fact goes on to say that the line recognises the contribution of the Windrush generation who continue to shape and enrich London's cultural and social identity today. Just as a quick tangent, Harrogate Council decided that making a webpage showing all of their contributions would be a good idea. So I'm just going to go through and pick out some highlights. So in 1948, the British Nationality Act is passed that grants the status of British subjects to citizens of the UK and colonies, stating that the expression British subjects and the expression Commonwealth citizen shall have the same meaning. Barely a year later, Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury Dock, heralding the start of large-scale immigration from the Caribbean. I like how they say that. They don't say, oh, they were invited over, you know, due to a labour shortage, people from the Caribbean were invited over. It's just, oh, Empire Windrush arrived. Right, yeah, you go into detail. It was, I believe, the New Zealand shipping company owned the Empire Windrush, realised that we're only being used to transport troops, we need to make some money on this, and so just put out an advert to Jamaica saying, please come on the Windrush, and so a load of them did, because they knew they could get over to Britain and have no issue with that. Unbelievably, a short-sighted act has somehow led to a domino effect happening, and now we need to effectively deify Caribbean people. I don't get it either. In 1949, the National Health Service began to recruit staff from the Caribbean after a largely unsuccessful campaign in Britain. The Tottenham Hospital Management Board reported such energetic campaigning deserves better results. Of 17 inquiries for 737 vacancies, only 2 potential students and 1 qualified nurse had come forward. In other words, the NHS was completely crap from the start. But the highlights just get weirder from there. In March, Tottenham Borough Council wrote to the Home Office to request the ban of the Fascist Union movement march from Dalston to Tottenham. This is a highlight of the Windrush generation, by the way. Tottenham Borough Council, that probably didn't have many Windrush people working for it, wrote to the Home Office to ban fascists. That's a highlight of the Windrush generation. Then Paul Robeson, US singer and political activist, was performing on a UK tour. Great highlight for the Windrush generation. In 1956, so we've had to skip 7 years now, Transport for London requested workers from Barbados. Again, Windrush generation highlight. And then finally you get to 1957, almost 10 years after the Windrush generation came in. We finally get someone who moved to the UK in 1951, so you can say they were part of the Windrush generation, to be a textiles designer. Again, we're effectively deifying an entire generation of people, because within the first 10 years of it happening, a textile designer came to the UK from Trinidad. That's it. That apparently deserves an entire London Overground line to be named after this generation. And then their last highlights are violence against black people led to race riots in Notting Hill and Nottingham in 1958, and then finally Trinidad-born activist Claudia Jones organised the first indoor Caribbean carnival in response to the violence. And this is all they can say. This is all Harrogate Council, who are obviously going to be hard pushing the Windrush generation of this positive impact in Britain. What's the most they can say? A US activist and singer came here on tour, some race riots happened, and the council wrote to the Home Office about some trouble with the fascists. I'm being quite serious here. What have the Windrush generation actually done? They've added something to the labour force, great. I suppose we needed to replace all the Brits who were paying a tenner to go over to Australia. Absolute insanity that we need to deify this particular generation, but this is Sadiq Khan's London. That's the highest myth that we need to worship. The Windrush generation. Anyway, next up is the Weaver Line. Again, not particularly offensive. The Weaver Line runs through Liverpool Street, Spitalfields, Benthall Green and Hackney, areas of London known for their textile trade and shaped by migrant communities and individuals. Okay, so it's not offensive on the face of it. As soon as Sadiq Khan comes along, though, he has to say, oh, these places are shaped by their migrant communities. Yeah, thanks, Sadiq. I really want to stop being reminded that London is no longer shaped by the English, of which London is the capital of. And they even make sure that in the graphic it says the area was shaped over the centuries by a diverse group of migrant communities. I just want to point out that according to census data, in Enfield, in 1981, it was 86% white. There is no way. I am just completely rejecting the idea that Enfield Town and other boroughs in London were shaped by diverse migrant communities over the centuries. I completely reject that. It's only a very recent thing. But I suppose when I said this was one of the least offensive ones at the start, this is progressively becoming more offensive. But that's the whole idea of this naming of the tube lines. It's complete demoralisation. White Brits didn't do anything in London. That's all Sadiq Khan wants you to know. Next up, the Suffragette Line. The Suffragette Line celebrates the working class movement. Emmeline Pankhurst was the daughter of a manufacturer. There's no way it was a working class movement. It was effectively a much more violent version of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. It was full of middle class women who had nothing better to do. Again, this whole move is simply there to gaslight the public. Anyway, apparently it celebrates the working class movement born in the East End that fought for votes for women. I don't know why he's saying it was born in the East End. It wasn't born in the East End. It was born in Manchester. Hence, whenever you go to Manchester, the Emmeline Pankhurst's face is absolutely everywhere. Barking was the home to Annie Huggett, the longest surviving suffragette. I mean, at least Annie lived in a council house, so we can actually call her working class. But my God, imagine calling it working class movement. Celebrating this movement with its London links that fought for votes for women and paved the way for women's rights and set letterbox on fire, bombed places, and all round were one of the most hated movements at the time, including by the suffragists, who were much more useful in actually getting women's votes. Next, the Mildmay Line. The Mildmay Mission Hospital is a small charitable hospital in Shoreditch that has cared for all Londoners for decades. It played a pivotal role in the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, honouring the work of the Mildmay NHS Hospital during the HIV/AIDS crisis that made it a valued and respected place for the LGBTQ+ community today. Least offensive line naming so far and explanation, let's just move on. The fifth one is the Lioness Line. Running through Wembley, this line honours the historic achievements and lasting legacy of the England women's football team that continues to inspire and empower the next generation of girls. Yeah, if it wasn't obvious from the very start, it's pretty obvious now that the only reason we are actually putting these names in is to try and gaslight the public into thinking that white men ain't done nothing. London wasn't made by white men at all. White men didn't do anything for London. It's all actually been shaped by minority communities. It's been shaped by women. It's been shaped by the gays. White straight men didn't do anything. That is what this is trying to tell you. There are more lines named after women than named after men. In fact, I don't think any are named after men, which I wouldn't really care about because the only women it's been named after so far are monarchs, which is absolutely reasonable. But when you're trying to shoehorn in the women's team, who, let's be fair, what, they won the Euros, I think, a few years ago? I don't even remember. And they lost the World Cup. Oh, look at these inspiring achievements. Yeah, I'm not being funny. Everyone's still waiting for the men to win something again. No one really cares about women's football. No one really remembers women's achievements. Which does it suck for win? Yeah, sure, but I'm afraid the men are just much more impressive, and I am fed up with this astroturfing of, oh, aren't the women doing great? Yeah, good for them. Who cares? Finally, the least offensive one, the Liberty Line. This line runs through Havering and celebrates the historic independence of the people of Havering and its status as a royal liberty, an area that traditionally had more self-governance and autonomy, celebrating the long-standing freedom that is a defining feature of London and the historic independence of the people of Havering. It's one of the whiter places in London, by the way. This is why they're not bringing up anything about, minorities, gay people, women, anything like that. But at the same time, at least this is the least offensive one. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous, the names that have come out for some of these lines, and the explanations for some of them just make them so much worse, but at least the Liberty Line is the least offensive. I would presume that is why they have chosen the colour grey. Anyway, what Sadiq Khan had to say about this is rather interesting. This is a hugely exciting moment, transforming how we think about London's transport network. Giving each of the overground lines distinct colours and identities will make it simpler and easier for passengers to get around. Got nothing wrong with anything of that, Sadiq. In reimagining London's tube map, we are also honouring and celebrating different parts of London's unique local history and culture. Okay. Again, I understand the practicalities of this, but trying to say it's celebrating part of London's unique local history and culture, I guess that's true for maybe about half of it, but then you're having to astroturf things like the Windrush generation. That's the most obvious one. I think the textile industry, trying to say that was centuries of minority people forming that, I don't think that's true. And finally, obviously, when you go through Wembley, I'm being serious, like even people who are fans of women's football, if you happen to get this far in the video, do you really think when people think of Wembley, they think of women's football? Is that the main thing that people are going to be thinking about when they think of Wembley? Or are they going to be thinking of all the FA Cup finals that happened there, all of the Charity Shield matches, all of the thousands of other events that happened there? Or do you seriously think it's the Lionesses? Do you think it's women's football people think about? I think people think more about the American football match that happened there once a few years ago before they think of the Lionesses. I'm just going to be real with you there. But this is Sadiq Khan. His whole platform is effectively be a Labour mayor because you get the free middle-class Labour student vote there, plus he's a minority, and guess what? Unfortunately, a lot of people do just basically vote because he is a minority, and that gives him effectively full dominance to do things like this. And this is why a lot of people want the capital to move, because it's just been completely bastardised from what it was. I mean, even people who aren't particularly aware of the politics behind all this, every time someone visits London and they come back, they always say, oh, the city's changed. It's not what it used to be. It's more that they'll use euphemisms like international or global or metropolitan. And it's never in the sense of, I prefer it this way. I've never heard anyone say that I prefer London as it is today to 10 years ago, say. And I'm not being funny, it's probably because things like this are absolutely everywhere and so ingrained that now they have to be on every overground line, apart from the Liberty Line. Anyway, I'm glad time and money was spent on simplifying and making the overground map more readable, to the point where it only really takes into account the past 20 years of London's history rather than the past 200, say. You could have had a Churchill line, you could have had a Wellington line, you could have just called one of them the Clapham line, like that would have been fine. There were so many other neutral names you could have gone with that would have angered absolutely no one. Palace line for the Windrush line, because it goes through Crystal Palace. Weaver line probably would have been fine if you didn't go on about minorities in it, when it's obviously just a very recent phenomenon that that's the case. The suffragette line's just offensive. I think literally anything else would have been better than naming it after terrorists. Mildmay line, that's fine, nothing wrong with that. Lioness line, obviously call that the Wembley line. And then, as I say, Liberty line's got absolutely no issue, but no, he has to go nuts with it. Probably because he wants a complete distraction from the colossal screw-up that is modern day London, and especially when it comes to crime there. I mean, let's not forget, I'm sure you've all seen the news story of this because it's the most famous news story of why the Met Police are completely useless. Chemical attack suspect Abdul Ezedi, who said he converted to Christianity to stay in the UK despite 2 failed previous attempts to get his asylum claim through. And also he had a history of sexual assault. Yeah, this complete total waste of space. Probably dead, police say. Met police say no body found, but Ezedi has not been seen since assault on woman and her daughters in London. By the way, he walked past the MI6 building, he walked past Scotland Yard, he's been on multiple CCTV cameras spotted. They still can't find him. The most 1984 place in the world, and they can't find a man who is missing half his face. No one even bothered to stop him. Like, why would you not ask if someone's okay if half their face looks like it was pushed into a fire? I don't know. Probably because Londoners don't talk to each other. But this is just the reality of London. They can't find genuine criminals, but oh, don't worry. The police are absolutely fine with investigating naughty people on Twitter. Anyway, given he's presumed dead, they've started searching the Thames. And so far in their search in the Thames, they have found 2 unexpected bodies in the search for Abdul. Neither of which are Abdul. I mean, to be fair, in a large body of water like that is pretty murky, you are going to lose bodies in there. I completely understand, but it is pretty grim to think London's largest waterway is effectively just a graveyard, and the police, to be fair to them, have probably searched for bodies before, or these particular bodies before, assuming they were reported missing, but my lord, it's grim, and the fact we don't know where Abdul is ridiculous to me. It's actually perfectly reasonable that he's just hidden within the migrant community again, and he's, hiding away while his face recovers. We actually have no idea where he is. The police have lost him, and he was the most sought-after man in London for a good week. It's absolutely incredible. And that wasn't the only acid attack. This week we had another acid attacker on a London bus before police had to come and tase him. I suppose at least we've caught this one, and I hope he's put into jail for a very long time. And if he is a migrant or an asylum seeker, get him kicked out. Send him away. I don't care where. If he says he's Christian, ignore it. Christians would not acid attack other people. Complete nonsense. And then, of course, we've got the consistent issue of knife crime, as you can see from here. Oh, there was quite a drop when COVID came down, so I suppose we just need to lock down the entire country again to stop knife crime happening. Before you know it, we'll have beaten the record for number of knife crimes in a year again, because the Met Police aren't very good at dealing with it. And then not only that, when people are shot openly at a house party, the charges on the main suspects are just dropped. It could be because they're innocent, it's quite hard to tell, but charges dropped in Sasha Johnson's shooting. The Black Equal Rights campaigner was shot in the head in Peckham in May 2021. I mean, this woman has half a head missing, was attacked by 4 men, and the police can't even manage to find the correct 4 men. In fact, people have got so desperate that a charity is offering a £20,000 reward for information on the shooting of Sasha Johnson. It's got so bad, the police are so bad at doing their jobs, that charities have to give out an extraordinary sum of money just to find 4 people that shot half a poor woman's head off. This is what people think of London, Sadiq. You can try and astroturf it with, oh, think of the Lionesses, oh, we love the Windrush generation. You can't even protect your black community. And your migrant community they're just getting acid attacks. You don't care about any of this. You're using it as a shield from criticism to call people like me racist. You have to lie about the suffragettes. You have to lie about the textile areas of London. You have to lie about the Windrush generation just to shield yourself from criticism of the fact that plenty of people from your minority communities that you love ever so much are dying. Jews are scared to go out on weekends in London these days, Sadiq Khan, because of all the pro-Palestine protests and people calling for an intifada against Israel and even attacking Jews, whether they like Israel or not. Your London is a complete mess. There have even been robberies in broad daylight in London pubs. People do not take your police force seriously. People do not take you seriously. And where are your priorities? Oh, they're in making sure that people understand that we're a feminist and pro-black community here in London. Absolutely insane. But hey, I suppose at least the Metropolitan Police are checking WhatsApp messages of policemen who might send a bit of a spicy meme. The highest priority for the Met at the moment should definitely be checking their own private WhatsApp messages to check that none of their force have an incredibly dark and spicy sense of humour. That is definitely where police resources should be in London at the moment. Not trying to find acid attackers. No. You walk past Scotland Yard, but we don't need to look out for acid attackers. Oh, woman missing half a head now. We found some black guys, but it was the wrong ones. You know, don't worry about it. We'll drop the charges now. I mean, the amount of absolute nonsense that I have covered in London over the years, it's just the cherry on top that Sadiq Khan's proudest moment is gaslighting the public with the names he's chosen for the London Overground. It's total cringe. Everyone knows it's complete nonsense. People can see it for the gaslighting it is. If London was still an English city, there's no way Sadiq Khan would ever have lasted more than a term. But hey, as far as I'm concerned, the Tories have only themselves to blame for never being able to get another London mayor in after Boris Johnson, because they did nothing about halting immigration and stopping the exponential growth of immigration. So this, you get what you deserve. Maybe one day the capital will move, but until that day comes, we just have to keep watching our capital go more and more cringe and more crime-ridden. What can you do about it? Well, sorry for the black pill. I'll try and make it a bit more white pilling tomorrow, but I really needed to have a go at Sadiq Khan because it was on my mind and I needed to get it off my chest. So that's everything I had for you today. So, once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.